Mexico, President Claudia Sheinbaum denied Trump's statements that she had agreed to close the borders to stop migration. The Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel assured on Wednesday that the country is ready to face any administration that occupies the White House. Thousands of Lebanese have returned home since Beirut and Tel Aviv agreed to a 60-day ceasefire, while in Gaza, genocidal troops continue to bomb camps full of women and children. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Stay with us. In Mexico, the President Claudia Sheinbaum denied Donald Trump's words in a message on the X network. Sheinbaum said that she explained to the U.S. President-elect the comprehensive strategy that Mexico has followed to address the migration phenomenon and reiterated that her country's position is not to close borders, but to build bridges between governments and between peoples. The Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel assured on Wednesday that the country is ready to face any administration that occupies the White House. From the municipality of Las Lajas in the province of Cienfuegos, the head of state assured a group of farmers and neighbors of the area that neither Republicans nor Democrats have represented a change for the island, in addition to reiterating that they are ready for the administration that will begin in January and recognizing the wariness about the also extraordinary effort of the Cuban people in the face of the sanctions. He also insisted that Havana remains open to any dialogue with Washington, but with equality and respect.
For us, the results of these elections are not new results. It was a foreseen scenario. It was a likely scenario, and we have been preparing ourselves for this scenario. And the relationship that exists with the government of the United States, is a totally asymmetric relationship, because they have imposed a blockade on us for more than 60 years. But it is a blockade that worsened in 2019, and that has been maintained with the current administration. That is to say, it is not a problem of administration. Two administrations of different parties have maintained the same position of hostility towards Cuba, and we have been in that position for all the years of the revolution. That is to say that the country is prepared. The country does not accept any type of interference. Our country does not renounce our model of social construction that we have to perfect, and the country, in the midst of the most difficult circumstances, will continue to work.
The Cuban president keeps the door open to dialogue with Washington, but without impositions.
And we have always stated that we have nothing against the people of the United States, and that we are willing to work on equal terms with the government of the United States, but in equality and confidences, without impositions, with respect, and of course nothing that affects our sovereignty or our independence. And that is our position.
In Panama, organizations in solidarity with Cuba held the first peace forum at the University of Panama to condemn the economic, financial, and commercial blockade imposed by the United States against the Cuban people. During the conference organized by the National Education Workers Union, the social sector made a call to respect the sovereignty and self-determination of the peoples, while qualifying the blockade against Cuba as the most comprehensive and prolonged system of unilateral coercive measures in history. They also denounced the unjust inclusion of Cuba on the list of countries sponsoring terrorism.
The peace we need to counteract violence against the peoples. For peace is not only the absence of war and conflict, but also sovereignty, self-determination, social justice, and respect among all human beings.
And now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and more. We'll be right back, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Venezuela has positioned itself among the vanguard countries in the struggle against fascism and its diverse expressions. And just this week, a new meeting called International Anti-Fascists for a New World is taking place. Details in the following report.
The revolutionary process promoted in Venezuela has once again become a benchmark in the fight against the various expressions of world fascism and has called on many international political and social organizations to organize and join forces.
Fascism is nothing more than a derivation. It is like an element that imperialism uses and capitalism uses to maintain its domination, to maintain its exploitation of the working men and women. So the anti-fascist struggle is also an anti-capitalist struggle. It is a struggle for the construction of socialism.
Es una lucha también anticapitalista. Es una lucha por la construcción del socialismo, que es la única vía.
Which is the only way we know of to be able to extinguish, as Comrade Randa said, definitively both capitalism and its most violent expressions or those with the greatest error in which it is expressed, which is fascism itself.
Con mayor horror que se expresa que es el propio fascismo.
One of the most representative fighters against capitalism was the revolutionary fighter Ernesto Che Guevara. And his daughter, the revolutionary Dr. Aleida Guevara, is worthy of inheriting Che's anti-fascist legacy.
¿Qué significa el fascismo?
What fascism means, look at the examples. This is what we have lived. This is what you can live if you allow it. This is what you want, for example, to be left without housing, for example, to be left without culture, for example, to hand over everything you have to another state so that it can come and dominate you and crush you and try to disappear you as a people. That is what you want? Surely not. So what we have to do is to try to be like my father. It is easier to make you follow than not having to force. And that is very important. We have to demonstrate our truths, but in such a way that the young people understand them and join the struggle out of conviction. Not because we are forcing them, but because we have convinced them that a better world is possible.
Within the analysis and reflection of the world geopolitical context, it was agreed that one of the ways in which fascism disguises itself is through governments elected under democratic mechanisms, but which act with authoritarian expressions that favor the interests of those who hold economic and political power.
The government as such has made policies that go against the Salvadoran people, public policies that are not in accordance with what the population is asking for, as in the case of the high cost of living, as in the case of regulations to apparently raise taxes. There are even regulations that had to go back a little because of the popular voice. When there are demonstrations of social organizations, there are many checkpoints, and the population is detained, and they are doing all kinds of actions that do not facilitate conditions for people to demonstrate.
Another of the manifestations of fascism, as an expression of capitalism, is the disregard of the cultural manifestations of the native peoples who struggle for their identity and dignity.
We are fully supporting the worldwide struggle against fascism. We are the representation of the native peoples of Guatemala, and we are here supporting and making a worldwide network so that we are respected as native people.
This concludes the first day held in Caracas to confront international fascism.
The Brazilian Supreme Court of Justice began on Wednesday debating on a regulation of social media in view of the spread of fake news and hate speech. The starting point of the regulation was a police inquiry into an alleged thwarted coup plot in 2022. The case involves former President Jair Bolsonaro. Authorities could determine that criminals used social media to misinform about the reliability of the electoral system to justify serious offenses. In addition, the court will decide whether social media platforms will be sanctioned for illegal publications or not by 2025. Concurrently, the entity has examined cases related to the rules for social media platforms and the responsibility for the contents published by users. And government confirmed that it will make cuts in public spending to generate savings, most of which will come from a reform of the military pension system. The Minister of Finance, Fernando Haddad, said that the measure will allow savings of 70 billion reals, equivalent to nearly $12 billion over the next 2 years. In the same instruction, the ministerial office confirms that the income tax exemption for those who earn up to 5,000 reals or slightly more than $800. According to Minister Haddad, these measures help to fight privileges incompatible with the principle of equality, and part of the objectives is to guarantee that all civil servants are subject to the constitutional principle. In Brazil, the launch of the global plan against hunger and poverty during the G20 summit reopens the debate between South and North on agricultural development models. Let's see more details in the following report.
During the G20 summit, President Lula da Silva gave concrete expression to Pope Francisco's idea by launching the global plan to combat hunger and poverty, a platform that was endorsed by 82 countries plus the European Union and the African Union.
We cannot talk about any public policy if we do not fight hunger, if we do not fight social inequality.
Pero la salida para eso es que no ficó muy claro.
But the way out for that was not very clear because the fund will be formed with money from the World Bank. Most of the fund will be for loans, and we already know how that works.
Funciona así. The neoliberal structural adjustment programs imposed by the World Bank in the 1960s encouraged the production of monoculture export crops. In the 1980s and 1990s, together with the International Monetary Fund, they pressured the countries of the Global South to abandon food production and focus on export crops such as coffee, tea, cocoa, and the purchase of basic foodstuffs on the world market. The result was dramatic. Today, a handful of transnational corporations dominate highly financialized agri-food markets. In 2023, some 2,330 million people around the world were moderately or severely food insecure. A recent report by the Fiocruz Health Institute states that 1 in 10 deaths in Brazil in 2019 were the result of the consumption of ultra-processed foods. Among the voices of world leaders at the G20, Latin American peasant movements adhere to two positions: Colombian President Gustavo Petros and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum.
It is the peasantry and the small farmer of each country that has the vocation to work the land and fulfill its social function, which is the #1 basis for feeding their own people and the world. We call this agrarian reform.
The statement that freedom is only in the market is a falsehood. What freedom? The freedom to starve to death? That is not freedom, it is oblivion, it is dehumanization.
In the opposite direction to the prescriptions of neoliberal organizations, the landless movement is approaching 20 years of cooperation with Venezuelan communes for the exchange of agroecological production practices.
The landless movement is here today in Venezuela, as it is in Zambia, as it is in Haiti or in Cuba. We are talking about peoples who are seeking, despite all the difficulties, despite all the siege that international organizations are carrying out, their paths, their search to transform the concrete reality of the people.
This week, during a debate in Brasilia, the Brazil-China Center for Research, Development and Promotion of Mechanization Technology for Family Farming launched this week a laboratory and will test Chinese machines and equipment that will operate in landless movement settlements.
China has a wonderful experience on how it fought poverty and social inequality. At the root is the agrarian reform they carried out between 1945 and 1952, when they distributed all the land.
The plan against hunger and poverty proposed to reach 500 million people with income distribution programs by 2030 and to expand school meals to 150 million children. In this context, the debate on land concentration and the role of agroecology is reopening.
The Prime Minister of Haiti, Alex Didier Filsaim, reported that he is working on a humanitarian aid operation for the people displaced by the escalating violence of criminal groups in the nation. The World Food Programme will embrace the operation that is set to distribute hot meals to over 23,000 refugees. The food will be handed out for 14 days at 4 strategic points in Port-au-Prince. The dynamic seeks to temporarily defuse the critical situation due to the existing violence in the country. According to the International Organization for Migration, at least 41,000 people have been forced to leave their homes in a 10-day period. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The summit of the Collective Security Treaty Organization began on Thursday in Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan. Its leaders reaffirmed that the coalition will ensure the security of all its members. The heads of state of Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Russia and Tajikistan met to discuss the political and military situation in the collective security regions and prospects for further cooperation within the powerful bloc. The host President Kasim Tokayev reaffirmed the collective commitment to maintain peace and security in the area. The organization, whose origins date back to 1991, has among its objectives the strengthening of stability in the space of these 5 republics. Israeli tanks broke the ceasefire agreement reached with Lebanon as artillery hit at least 3 towns in the country's southern region. Precisely the areas of Markaba, Wassani, and Farshuba were attacked by the Zionists in an aggression that has yet to be reported by Israeli forces and which left at least 3 people wounded. Despite the validity of the ceasefire agreement that started on Wednesday at 4 a.m. local time, the Zionist forces attacked these cities a few kilometers from the Blue Line, the area that delimits Lebanon from the occupation. Intervention of the United States and France, Israel has not completely withdrawn its troops from the line border. Thousands of Lebanese have returned home since Beirut and Tel Aviv agreed to a 60-day ceasefire, while in Gaza, genocidal troops continued to bomb camps full of women and children. Today completes 56 days of armed siege and blockade to humanitarian aid in Beit Lahia in the north of Gaza. Along the strip, the occupying forces have assassinated more than 20 civilians, among them a pregnant woman, in the last 24 hours. Israel's genocide in Gaza has killed at least 44,282 Palestinians and wounded 104,880 others since October 7, 2023. We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok as well. For teleSUR English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.